Welcome to Rising Up for Justice, a special weekly series presented by Rising Up with Sonali, an independently produced, subscriber-supported program syndicated to radio stations, free speech TV, and podcast platforms. I'm Sonali Kolhatkar, host and executive producer. Our nation and our world is overrun by billionaires and bigots, but they are few and we are many. On this new series, exclusive to subscribers of Rising Up with Sonali and viewers of Free Speech TV, we'll hear from organizers in the movements for social justice, and we'll dig into the nuts and bolts of values, strategies, tactics, narratives, and building power. This week, our guest is Nourbese Flint, president of All Above All and All in Action Fund, leading their work to build political power and achieve reproductive justice for all. Welcome to the program, Nourbese.
Thank you for having me.
What does All Above All mean? I get that it's a reproductive justice organization, but that name, I think, in explanation of it can help people understand where you're coming from.
Yeah, so it's actually a part of our origin story. All Above All was created right after the Affordable Care Act passing. I think it was in 2008, 2010.
2010, I think, yeah.
Yeah. And, oh God, I'm like dating myself. Um, but once when it got passed, the kind of compromise was abortion access. So we still didn't have any federal coverage of abortion, and we had to segment it in state coverage for abortion access. And so some of us got together and came and had a conversation like we can no longer have and leverage abortion access, particularly abortion access that really impacts folks who are living at the margins as a tool anymore. And so All Above All really leaned into when people say all, it's usually with an asterisk, and it's not really all. It's well, all except women of color, or all except LGBT folks, or all except young people. And so we wanted to lean into the all. When we say all, it means all. So all above all, with the asterisk, saying that we are actually putting first the folks that usually are the asterisks at the bottom.
And so, a comprehensive, encompassing approach to abortion. Your organization's website also says it's an abortion forward organization. What does that mean?
Yeah, so we again started talking and thinking about and pushing the narrative and conversation around abortion access, and particularly coverage around abortion access. And we wanted to make sure that we were unapologetic about the talking about abortion access, because when we started back in 2010, there was still a lot of like abortion in the dark rooms, and like we whispered the word abortion, but it
There was
wasn't a
shame,
conversation.
shame
Yeah,
around it. Yeah.
a lot of shame around it. And so we were coming out and being very bold about saying that we are fighting for abortion access. And so we say that we are abortion forward because we use and talk about abortion, but we use a reproductive justice framework, which was created in 1994 by women of color, particularly Black women, that has an intersectional approach to abortion access. And so we want to like lean into the conversation around abortion access while holding the roots of reproductive justice.
And those issues these days, unfortunately, are still so fraught, right? Because this issue of intersectionality, of people holding multiple identities, of people lifting up marginalized communities, is seeing such a virulent pushback. And also, there really isn't a discussion around abortion. It is actually still in the works in terms of legislation, but we're not seeing it in the headlines. Do you feel that that emphasizes the need for your organization more than ever now?
Yeah, I mean, I keep telling folks I feel like I've been aging in dog years because it's been so fraught, and understandably so, that there is a million things that are coming with democracy and immigration and all these pieces that are happening to our communities all at the same time. And so pieces like abortion access, the ability to have full autonomy over your lives has fallen out of the top headlines, but that fight is still happening and people are still being affected by the lack of coverage, the lack of access, the lack of being able to get to a provider in a timely fashion. And we've seen that in the stats. We've seen places that have banned abortion have higher rates of infant and maternal mortality. We've seen folks having to travel farther and farther to get access that they need. And we know that there's still more attacks coming, whether it's in Tala or what we're seeing with the ACA, that they're still going and trying to take what is a regional ban, so depending on your zip code around abortion access, into a national ban on abortion access. And what we want to emphasize and what I keep wanting to hope that our movement gets is that just I wish we can be just as intersectional in the way we are thinking about how we are fighting for our liberation as they are about taking it.
Hmm.
Because all the folks who are uh, the immigration, the anti-immigrant folks, the anti-democracy folks, the technocrats, all of those folks have united together to fight this fight. And we need to have that same type of energy and know that we can't segment ourselves into like these little kind of pieces that our work on repro doesn't affect climate justice or economic justice, that these all of these things are intertwined.
So, how does All Above All go about achieving your goals? On your website, you discussed that there are federal issues that you work on, but also state level issues. What is your approach to ensuring that reproductive rights and justice are available to all?
Yes, so we take a comprehensive approach using five strategies. So one is policy and advocacy. We introduced a piece of legislation called Each Act. This is groundbreaking legislation to repeal the Hyde Amendment. This is the kind of archaic law that has been on the books since 1976 that bans federal coverage. But we're also looking and thinking about how to make as much progress as we can at the state level, as well as defend all the rights that we can as well. Excuse me, we can defend all the rights that we can at the state level as well. What that also looks like is thinking about how we do narrative work, which is another one of our strategies. We know the conversation around abortion access, we know the conversation around reproductive justice, that the culture and how people think about it is just as important, if not more important, than the policy work itself. So we do a lot of work around storytelling, narratives, setting the agenda, really get it into the cultural conversations of what it looks like to have reproductive justice as a marker, as a vision, as something that we want to achieve. We also work at building coalition, both inter-movement and across movement, which is the piece where it's incredibly important. Like we only can go so far alone. And so we make sure that we are building the type of coalition that we need that is that is representative of the people that we are representing, as well as building the power base that we need in order to get things out of conception and into reality so people can have tangible ways in which they can feel the type of work that we are doing.
And I definitely want to ask you more about the allies that you work with and how All Above All fits in the broader landscape. But I want to hone in on what you were saying about the Each Act. I don't know if too many people have heard about this. Tell me what exactly that is. We often talk about the things that we're against without putting forward or without necessarily emphasizing concrete goal to go for. So, what is the Each Act? What would it do and why are you backing it?
Yeah, so the Each Act is a piece of legislation that would remove federal remove bans on federal coverage for abortion. So currently, if you are somebody in the military, if you work for a federal agency, if you are on Medicaid or Medicare, you do not have coverage for abortion
There's
under
all
your
these
insurance.
carve outs, basically.
Yeah. And so what that does is it makes that a whole group of folks not able to get access to abortion care through their health care insurance, and they will have to come out of pocket to get the care that they need when they need it. And so the Each Act actually goes straight at it at the Hyde Amendment and says, like, actually, we need to take this and ban this coverage or ban on coverage so that we have the ability to have everybody have the ability to have full coverage of abortion in their health insurance. The Hyde Amendment actually came in 1976. It was, again, another one of those compromise pieces. It is not something that is in law, but it's something that the Congress has to appropriate every sign they do appropriation. So every new budget is what they have to reapply the Hyde Amendment. And they do every single time since 1976. Last year, or yeah, I think a couple of years ago, excuse me, the Biden and Harris administration were the first to actually offer a budget without it. We've had the House offer a budget without it, but we've never been able to get all three of the bodies offering a budget without it at the same time. And so the Each Act is actually saying, let's just ban it all together and like have and not keep instituting this coverage ban and just once and for all say that people should have affordable, available, and accessible abortion care.
There's also an Abortion Justice Act introduced by Representative Ayanna Pressley that your organization is backing. Is that in line with what the Each Act asks for?
Yeah, so the AJA or Abortion Justice Act is actually it is our goal kind of vision bill. So we also know that since we've started, the abortion access has changed tectonically. And depending on your zip code and where you are, is depending on how much access that you get. And so Abortion Justice Act not only talks about the bands of coverage that we need to repeal, but also affirmatively looks at the way in which we should be thinking about Abortion Act, which is like removing trap laws, making sure we have the enough providers to be able to practice abortion, that they be able to learn the study and craft if you're an obstetrician or gynecologist or any of the other professions that do and offer abortions. It makes sure that we are looking at immigration and other folks who have been left out of the conversation around abortion access. So it's really our big vision bill because we thought it was incredibly important to not only say what we don't want, but to have the alternative of what we do want when abortion coverage looks full and that is representative and that is what people deserve.
Let's also talk about the statewide goals that all above all is pursuing, because of course, depending upon which state you live in the United States, abortion access is different. We've seen Republican and unfortunately Republican leadership very specifically take aim against access to abortion. And so if you live in states like Texas or Florida, you have a very, very different landscape out there for a person who is seeking an abortion compared to somebody, say, living in California, right? So what are some of the approaches that you take to ensuring equal access geographically?
Yeah, so we take all of the pieces that we look at, so policy, narrative, strategy accelerating, as well as coalition building, and we take that at the state level. So in some states, we are on the offense, looking and working with partners and elected officials to expand abortion access, which we've done in Maryland and in Colorado, and worked with folks in California to do so. And then we look at also ways that we might need to play defense, which is coalescing people, looking at ballot measures. We worked on the ballot measure in Florida that got so close. It got to, I believe, 55%. We needed 57 um, to get passed. And we look at creative ways in which we can push the envelope around abortion access, as well as creating the terrain that's possible for us to get the policy passed. So sometimes it's not policy work, and what it looks like is coalescing people around a conversation about how we could move abortion access forward, maybe not this year, next year, but in 5 years. And what do we need to do that?
I want to go back to what you were saying around the importance of narrative work. It seems as though in the last few years, especially, a lot of social justice organizations have realized how important it is to focus on storytelling and culture shifting, because policy changes without having a majority of Americans kind of on board culturally with your goals can threaten them in the long term. We can see an undoing. And of course, on the issue of abortion, this is especially true where we've had, as we were saying earlier, so much shame, so much stigma around that. And even liberal industries like Hollywood have traditionally fed into that stigma and that shame. So how exactly does All Above All engage in storytelling? I understand you also have a way that brings men into the movement, which I think is wonderfully refreshing.
Yeah, so we do this in a couple of ways. One is preparing and giving tools and resources, whether it's talking point or messaging, both to the movement and elected officials. For a long time, people used to talk about abortion with the safe, legal, and rare, which is not the way we wanted to talk about it. For a long time, we had a conversation around, well, yes, but there's no federal funding around abortion access as a proud badge, which was problematic. And so we took the time to do the data, the research, talk to people, and created a toolkit of messaging that we can use and that people do use to talk about abortion access in a way that doesn't hurt our future goals of making sure that abortion access is available for the people who need it and for the people who need it when they need it, excuse me. The other pieces that we did is looking at how we can have conversations out in public. So that looks like having panel conversations. That look like talking with partners who are not in repro. I am tickled in the sense of right after Dobbs, we had a ton of
And this
organizations.
was just for our audience, the Supreme Court decision that overturned Roe versus Wade.
Sorry, it's shorthand in our in
Of
my
course, of
world.
course. I get
Um,
it.
So after Dodds, we had a ton of organizations that were just like, we need to talk about abortion, who have never talked about abortion before. And so we were able to like align strategy and conversation with a ton of different organizations that are not in our movement. So then they would also be like hurting, um, you know, inadvertently the conversation about abortion access when they start to engage with their members, with their people, and with their constituents about it. We also been thinking of creative ways to get into the social media space, creative ways to get into the ad space. So we created a couple of ads last cycle that really landed how abortion access can impact people on the ground, and was able to deliver that to folks in the progressive space. And they were able to use that without our logos. So if they wanted to run the ads, which people did in their spaces, to really kind of land home what the impact of abortion access. And we did that specifically from a man's point of view, which leads into the men's work that we do. Um, a couple of years ago, we have been like really trying to have these conversations like, where are the men at? And I was having a conversation with a couple of guys who were like on the front lines. They were like, yes, we care about abortion access, and we think our being allies is actually shutting up and letting women be in front. And I was like, no, that is not what we want you to do. And so we ended up doing some polling. And what it seems that what came from the polling is that men of color really cared about abortion access. They were supportive about abortion access. but they did not hear from reproductive or women's health organizations about what or how they should engage, and that they didn't know or have any on-ramps to engage. And so we went out and started having conversation with men's organizations, partnering with organizations like Men for Choice, as well as getting people on the ground, getting men on the ground and taking them to DC for them to talk about their own abortion stories and have conversations about why this is an issue that they care about.
I'm wondering if you can talk about the intersectionality aspect of this a little bit more. You're someone who has a background in Black maternal health. And although, of course, it's really important to emphasize that there should be no exceptions to abortion access, the truth is that reproductive health impacts, of course, different groups, different demographics differently. And we're seeing such a pushback against discussing things in terms of racial justice or in terms of just identifying racial groups that are disproportionately impacted. But for that very reason, I'd love to lean into that. And I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit about how, specifically when it comes to communities that suffer more, women of color, low-income women, immigrant women, Black women, how that intersection with reproductive health access is a goal that you work towards achieving.
Yeah. So I think to kind of back into this conversation or that question a bit, it's helpful to talk about like the origin story of reproductive justice. So reproductive justice was founded in 1994, right after the Fourth World Conference on Women. And it was founded by 12 Black women who saw that we needed to expand the conversation of reproductive rights and reproductive health, and why so many people, particularly the second wave of feminism, and folks who were in that kind of feminism ideology at the time, were fighting for the right to not have children. Women of color were fighting for the right to have children, given some of the eugenics practices that were happening in this country, and also just some of the pieces that were happening around the birth control testing that was happening in Puerto Rico and with Southern Black women around the country. And so there was an intentionality to have a human rights intersectional approach to the way we see and address what was happening around our autonomy. And that is like kind of the origin stories as well as how we see, or the framework, excuse me, is how we use or think about the work at All Above All. We see it as abortion access as a part of the spectrum of care, and that when we think about what full autonomy means, we think of it as the right to have a child, not have a child, but also the ability to parent. That is not simply about having access, but if you are making a choice about not having a child because you don't have housing or you don't have equal pay or time off, that actually is not a choice. That if you are deciding to not carry a pregnancy because you don't have childcare is too much, that actually is not a decision. That when we talk about abortion as a decision and full autonomy, is that people are deciding that they don't want to have children because they don't want to have children at that moment or never, not because that we have created a society that has made it so hard to be a parent. And so that, I think, is that is the framework that we use, that we really care about what autonomy is in practicality, the tangibility of it. And so that we need to work in an intersectional way with our partners about how we actualize that in the way we are not only doing our policy, but the way in which we have conversations and in the culture of full reproductive justice.
Nourbese, do you feel that the landscape has gotten better? I mean, obviously not legislatively. There's just such a stranglehold of disproportionately conservative anti-abortion legislators. But at the public level, at the cultural level, what are the challenges that remain for the work that you do? And has the landscape gotten better?
I mean, that is like a question that I've been really sitting with because in terms of the conversation, we do see that people talk about abortion access um, more in ways that we haven't seen before, and definitely we haven't seen in the last 15 to 20 years. But when we think about the tangible access to abortion, the tangible outcomes that we see for maternal health, that those have not improved, and in some places they have gotten worse. And so it is, we see almost kind of a struggle in which that in some ways that we've pulled and then been really great at getting the culture conversation, but the policies have not matched that, right? And so our work is to make sure that the tangible policies, the tangible actual ways in which people feel their ability to exercise their full autonomy matches the conversation, that we have shifted the Overton window a bit, but that with that Overton window, we also have to shift the actual policies to go with it. And so in the ways, yes, there's been some great things that we should talk about and acknowledge and some wins. And in some ways that we are going backwards. In some ways that we have to um, really think about how we're going to pivot. When I mean pivot, not pivot in terms of the vision, but make sure that we are taking into account that like democracy is something that is needed in order for us to have full autonomy. So how are we having these fuller conversations about how reproductive justice, how feminism, how abortion access also is in hand in hand in democracy, and that the lack of it actually impacts us being able to have autonomy over our lives.
Well, I want to thank you so much, Nourbese, for joining us. Briefly give out a website for All Above All.
Yes, you can hit us at allaboveall.org, and you can find us on all the socials as well.
My guest has been Nourbese Flint, president of All Above All and All in Action Fund, leading their work to build political power and achieve reproductive justice for all. This is Rising Up for Justice, and I'm Sonali Kolhatkar, host and executive producer of this new weekly half-hour series, exclusive to viewers of Free Speech TV and subscribers of my long-standing program, Rising Up with Sonali. Find out more at risingupwithsonali.com.